Hey guys, welcome to another video on Bharat and Germany. This is actually going to be our very first episode of a new podcast, which is called Jobs in Germany. And in this, we have Riaz with us, who has done his bachelor's from SRH and is now currently working full-time at Zalando. And he has a pretty interesting story to share. So Riaz, welcome to the podcast. Tell us a bit about yourself, and then we jump into your life story.
Hi, Bharat. Really happy to be here on your channel. Thanks for having me. Sure. My name is Riaz, and I come originally from Mumbai in India, and I've been in Berlin since the past 5 years now. But my journey to Germany began way before I even came to Germany. I was here as a tourist in the winter of 2015. Did a 2-week long trip throughout Germany just as a tourist, and my goal for this trip was twofold. One, to decide what city I wanted to live in Germany, and two, what kind of university I wanted to get into. And then exactly a year later, not as a tourist, I came here as a student in winter 2016. And I was a student of international business, focused on e-business at a private university called SRH Hochschule in Berlin. A main reason behind choosing a Hochschule was because there were no language barriers. Most bachelor courses here in Germany, especially for business fields, is entirely in German. Having had no German skills, this was my first preference.
Now, Riaz, was it like, did you have to jump through the hoops of like STUDIENKOLLEG or something, or how did it run for you, like with the bachelor's?
Good question, actually. So when I came here, I had done my GCSEs in India and then A levels. From what I know, A levels and IB, those who've done either one of these two, do not have to do a STUDIENKOLLEG.
Right. Yeah.
But for every other board like CBSE, SSC, and ICSC, a STUDIENKOLLEG is mandatory.
That's very nice. Now, also an interesting thing, like this is for the people like who choose like CBSE over IB or something. Like, did your parents like already know the benefits or something like or how do you decide like, you know, one board over the other? Like how did they decide that?
If I try to remember I moved to, so when I said I'm originally from Mumbai, I actually grew up in DR Congo, which is a country in Central Africa. So when we moved to India, GCSEs and A-level were slightly similar to the studies that I have done back in Africa, which is why my parents decided to get me into one of those schools, but never was the plan that they thought that I would move out of India one day. And we hadn't planned this at all.
Okay.
It just happened to be it.
First of all, like, you know, coming to, let's say, a private university, many people feel like, okay, like, you know, maybe like it's not like the same like public universities and things like that. And even though when you see like some of the best business schools are private universities and private business schools. So what was your experience like with studying at SRH Berlin?
Overall, I would say it was a positive experience. A couple of things. I think coming to Germany and doing your bachelor's here is a great benefit because it doesn't take as long as it would if you went to Canada or the UK or Australia. A business degree, specifically, let's say finance degree, is 3 years here instead of 4, which was, I think, the biggest reason why I chose to come here. You save 1 year. And apart from that, the value that the private universities give versus public, I wouldn't say that there's a huge difference, but it also depends on which private institution you go to. And
absolutely. Yeah.
In my case, like the one I went to is an FIBA accredited university, which means that if I went to a public business school, the degree is somewhat on the same level. So the degree is on the same level, but what about the teaching and what about the courses? I think there's a standardized, like let's say most of the education around like business programs here in Germany are pretty standard. So there wasn't much of a difference between the course curriculum in other public universities. And yeah, I think the only big benefit is that you don't have to learn German if you get into Schule in the end.
Absolutely. I think like for sure, like, you know, private universities, like there are like some decent ones for sure, but there are also like some very shady ones. I remember like there was one university or something which lost its accreditation for a while, and like, you know, then sometimes like you always have these kind of like negative experiences from the students. So I think like it does make sense that when you're going to any university, like kind of like do a background check, like, talk to the people on LinkedIn who are studying there, like learn about their experience. But I think overall, I've also like only heard like, positive things about SRH Burden. And did you see like that some kind of fear or something like when you like started studying that because now you are studying in a English program or something, finding jobs is going to be difficult, something like that?
Oh yeah, that is a con, right? A result of studying at a private university is if you're not motivated enough to learn German, then eventually it can be difficult to land a job. Um, if I speak for the business field, German is a requirement in most of the positions that you see online.
Yeah.
So what's very important is, irrespective of, hey, your course is in English, you still should continue to learn German on the side, because otherwise you're not even qualifying to apply to the jobs that you see online, because most of them require German. Yeah, and the moment you don't show any German skills, you're not even in the pool of candidates, right? So it's very difficult that way.
Absolutely. I remember my info session, and I studied in TU Hamburg, and there was an info session at University of Hamburg. So like these are two like different universities. And like this info session was conducted by McKinsey, Boston Consulting, and I think there was one more, Heis Recruiting, and like these three companies were there. And like they were like students, who wanted to go from engineering side and like wanted to start in management consulting. And I went there and I asked like this typical like, foreigner question. And that is like, if you don't have like, solid German proficiency, can you still land a job at your company or something? And like McKinsey, people from McKinsey said it right away, like, if you are coming from, if you don't have native German proficiency, then for us to give you more responsibilities becomes difficult. That means we cannot also like, put you in any place that we want. So this is going to restrict us, which kind of like holds us back from like, hiring people who do not have very good German proficiency. And like that kind of like also made sense, because like if you're paying somebody like 4,000, 5,000 euros, then you essentially like, want them to be able to do multiple things and not just like, in like one very specific field. So that was the part that I kind of like learned a bit early, especially in the business field. If you have German proficiency, like these kind of things always help you out. Okay, Ria, so like, how did you find your first part-time job in Germany?
Okay, so while I was a student here, like I said, again, I did not have any German skills before I came to Germany. So it was extremely difficult, even for a working student position. So I applied to quite a few, but always used to get rejected. And then I thought to myself, hey, why not do a job that is not similar to your field and gain that German language relevant experience that you need, and then start applying to field related jobs. So in the beginning, for a couple of months, I worked as a cashier at German supermarket chains, which helped me learn the German that I needed. I still remember first day on the job, I wouldn't know the names of certain items and vegetables here in German. So it was very funny, but eventually, at least those jobs helped me learn basic German, conversational German. And on the side, I was learning German at university. Once I had those skills, I thought it might get easier. So I started applying for working student positions again. But I still realized, another thing that I'm missing here is the experience. So I think I gave 16 to 17 job interviews for a working student position. And then eventually on the 17th one, I got an offer from a startup, which is based in Berlin. So back then, this was 2018, I started working as a finance working student.
At that time, Riaz, what kind of range can people like expect, like, in terms of salary when they're working at Werkstudent, like without any kind of experience?
So without any kind of experience, I would say the minimum hourly wage, which is set by the German state, is 9.64 for this year per hour. So I think you should expect to earn that much, irrespective of the job that you're doing, whether it's a cashier, whether it's a field-related job. So I would say up to like 10 should be the starting, and
Mhm.
it can go above then.
Makes sense. And how was your experience like, working at a startup? Like, was it a small team? How was the working environment?
So this startup was a very small team of 16 people, if I remember correctly. Uh, I think for people who don't have experience and are starting their career just very recently, the best experience you can get is at a startup, because you kind of involved in a lot of other departments as well. Since it's a very small team, you learn a lot from others, and it's very wild, very demanding sometimes, but in the end, it teaches you a lot. So the work culture at the startup that it was a very international environment. I think we did not have one German in the team.
Mhm.
And I think that was the best part about it, right? Everyone's from every other country, and we used to get together outside of work, during work, and it was always an exciting ride. Yeah.
And Riaz, so for all of the other interviews that you got, like, these 16, 17 interviews, what were the reasons for rejections? Did you receive any kind of feedback from them?
Yes, so normally companies don't send feedback at the beginning.
Yeah.
They use a template, or let's say mass rejection email templates.
Yeah.
Unless you ask for feedback, which at times they don't even give. So
Yeah.
when I asked, mostly the reasons were, hey, I don't have experience in finance, or sometimes it was about German, that I don't have a C1 level German, which definitely takes a couple of years. So those were, I think, the top two reasons for job rejections.
I definitely find it interesting because like now you're working as a financial controller, and I mean like you also then I think would have to know these trade laws, right? Like this Handelsgesetzbuch, like you have to like essentially use a lot, like we used to have it like in our masters when we were like doing Rechnungswesen, so accounting, and
Yeah.
I failed in that. The first time I gave the exam, I failed. I hated that subject so much. And I was just like kind of procrastinating. I would make a timetable for myself and like I would like, okay, like this day I have to do this, learn a bit of accounting and like practice for the exams and stuff. But I just wouldn't get to it because I would find that so boring. So the first time I failed, and like I realized that I think like I cannot take it so lightly because I was like, okay, accounting, like it's simple maths or something, like what kind of things do I need? But then when you have to use this book, Handelsgesetzbuch, which is in German, and like many other people, so like my German batchmates were able to like go through it so quickly. They were able to like read everything and like, yeah, okay, like this is written, this is what they have to write in the exam, and like done. So like, and I did this clause to use and so on. Didn't work for me. Did you see some problems like that at that time when you were like working as a Werkstudent, like that you had to like use maybe, I don't know, have some contact with the authorities in German or using books which are written in German? And how did you cope up with that?
Yeah, definitely. I did have a lot of problem when I started as a work student at this position, because what you learn in German language courses is not business German. That's conversational German, or everyday German as we call it. So when you actually land a job in German, there's a lot of learning that happens on the job. A lot of terms that you've never heard of. Um, and so I definitely had one of those moments when I remember when I used to talk to the Finanzamt, which is a tax office here in Germany. They would never talk in English, and German was the only way to communicate. But I think these things, when I was forced to speak in German, that's the only way I got better at it. If there was no external factor that was pushing me to learn German, I think it would have been much harder to learn German today. Um, but yeah, I think it is a difficult language. Definitely requires a lot of practice, but it's not impossible. I think if you are consistent with learning that language, use it every day, you can easily get to B1, B2 level in 1.5 years.
Absolutely. And for me, for example, the biggest reason to learn German was because I didn't have any doors open for me. My bachelor's score were 70% in my bachelor's. So it was like in such a range that like for structural engineering side, like I'm a civil engineer, so I wanted to do my master in structures. And it was like in a range where I could like maybe get public university. So I was like, I cannot take this risk, so let me learn German. And I really have to learn German till this time so that I could like actually start my master's right away. So I had like all of this stress, and I kind of had a lot to lose at that time, because I just like built a lot of kind of like goals for myself. So I think like if you do it like that, definitely helps, because I, for example, sometimes come across people in Germany who are living in Germany since last 10 years, and like they do not know how to speak German like still properly. And it is like, I think many people have this like wrong idea that just because you're living in Germany, you will automatically learn German. I think like that doesn't happen. You have to
Yeah.
force yourself. You have to put the efforts inside. You have to like sit down and see like, what kind of words you have to learn, how to make sentences and so on. And then only like, you get somewhere. I think like that's one thing that I've definitely learned.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Perfect.
in big cities, like I think you were in Hamburg, right? So
Yeah.
Hamburg, Berlin, you don't automatically learn German, because here you don't really need German to survive,
Mm.
apart from the paperwork. But every more or less everyone speaks English, so that's why it's important to make an effort.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, when you were doing your bachelor's, was it like an active, let's say, initiative from your side that like you want to like network with people, or like, how did you like kind of get those, like we were talking about your part-time job, right? So what kind of ways did you choose? What kind of portals, platforms, whatsoever that you like, got these interviews, and like then you ended up choosing this last one?
Yeah. So it is a lot. It's a long journey, a lot of effort that goes into applying for jobs. But to name a few platforms, let's start with platforms, and then I can probably give some tips on the application side. There's a lot of platforms. I think LinkedIn, the biggest one. There's Stepstone that I have used in the past. I've also used some specifically Berlin related sites. Called one of them is berlinstartupjobs.de.
Mm.
So there's quite a few that I use there. And then last but not the least, there's always the company career sites, right? Where you can apply directly.
Mm.
So I use that. And then also, I think during the process, it was before starting with that process, again, what you need is a CV and a cover letter. I think for job applications, it's not about how many jobs you apply to. It's more about quality than quantity.
Yeah.
Less is, I think the whole less is more is applies right here. So these two documents determine if you are going to get the job or not. So I would suggest spend a lot of time, good amount of time making them as precise and beautiful as possible. So for my CV, I think very important, like there's German way, CVs in Germany must have a picture because everyone demands a picture. So definitely get a good picture, professional picture on the CV, and a very short about you section. And then later I would say, yeah, it shouldn't be longer than one page. I think one page is as much as it should get. And then I think the next most important piece is the cover letter. This is very important to show that what you can bring to the table, and it should be in line with what the job description says, right? So there should be quite a few keywords that should match, let's say, the job description, because nowadays, I'm not sure if you know this, Bharat, but some startups, some companies use applicant tracking softwares,
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
which match the keyword with the cover letter. And the moment there's not a certain level of similarity, the CV doesn't even get to a real human. It just gets rejected immediately.
Mm.
So that's the big number one tip I would give, that
Mhm.
definitely match some keywords.
Absolutely. I think like that's very important. I know like sometimes people don't take the effort of like reading the job description, and then they wonder how are they not getting any kind of like, feedback from the companies or any kind of responses whatsoever. I've also seen that, for example, now when we hire generally, so I also get like applications and stuff for my marketing consulting company. This is like Brand Device Consulting, SRL. And they're like, sometimes I just don't get the time to like kind of like, get back to the people with a feedback or something. And also like with the companies, there's a big risk that if you give a feedback, and like the person doesn't take the feedback well or something, then you can also like face some kind of like legal actions or consequences if you're not very careful in like, how you're choosing your words. So like this is also one of the reasons why the companies have like lately like really stopped like giving any kind of feedback like most of the time. So like you will just always see these like copy paste emails, and then it's not so nice because like it leaves you guessing. You do not know what kind of things you have to improve in order to find a job afterwards. But then I think like, kind of talking to more people and like learning from their experiences really helps, which was also the goal for this podcast, so that I could like, interview different people, see what experiences they have, and then we can put all of that in an organized way. Perfect. Now, Riaz, how did you then transition? Because I see on your LinkedIn profile that you were doing your part-time job, and then afterwards you started full-time with the same company. So is it true? Like, because of course, I mean, it is true to an extent that like if you perform very well in your part-time job or in your internship, you get the full-time job offer like rather like easily. So how was it for you? What kind of conversation happened that you were like, okay, I'm going to now transition into a full-time employee at the same company?
Mm, yeah. So I agree that to some extent it is very true that performance, if your performance is well, you might end up in a full-time job at the same company. Again, there's several variables because of which this may not be possible. One, that the company is not hiring for that position. Two, the company is no longer even there, right? So in my case, neither of which was the case. For a company that small, it was easier for them to take someone who worked there already rather than get someone on board and then spend that time on onboarding the other person.
Yeah.
In most cases, I know for my friends, it's worked. For a lot of other people, it's worked. So I think, yeah, if you perform well in your working student internship job, there's very high chances of landing a full-time job at the same company. Again, the biggest benefit of doing so to you and to you right now is right after graduation, you're not hunting for a new job. You're not trying to get behind the job seeker visa. You can immediately apply for the work permit, which is a very big benefit because that counts towards your settlement programs here, and a lot of other benefits to the companies as well.
Absolutely. And like during your internship, what do you think? What kind of things did you do right? Like that this transition went well? Like what were the do's and don'ts? If you look back at the times there, like what kind of things did you do right? What kind of things did you do wrong?
Yeah. Well, I have to go back, remind myself 2 years now. So as far as I remember, when I joined exactly 2 years ago, it was more about, hey, do I have a good understanding about the company, what they do, what kind of product or service they're trying to sell? So have a very good understanding about what your own company does, because if you don't have that, that's not a very good message to the founders, to the CEO. And after that comes the job part, right? That in your field where you're working, it's imperative to have the relevant skills at least to perform. So that was very important. I used to have frequent one-on-one sessions with my bosses, which was back then, I think, bi-weekly, which was a nice cadence. We used to get together over, let's say, coffee or something else and just talk about which areas I am good at, which areas need improvement. Let's not say I'm bad at, but more about where can you improve? That's always the idea that we were talking about. So it's okay if you don't know something. It's okay if you don't have the skills for what you need to do on the job. You can always learn, right? But it's very important to get continuous feedback from your boss and from anyone that you're reporting to, so that you can ensure if at some point something's going wrong, you or him or her can correct it. So I think if you follow that path, it should be fairly easy to land the job right after finishing working student.
So like were you also like actively like reaching out for feedback? I mean, I don't think like that was necessary because anyways you're having like the calls every 2 weeks, but like was there also a moment where you were like, okay, can you tell me how am I doing? Or was it like necessary at all for you?
Yeah, I think there was constant feedback. We never waited for hey, the second week, the bi-weekly one-on-ones are coming up, we'll keep it for then. But normally it was like on the go, right? If we thought of something, either him or me, we would just discuss it right away. What I really liked about where I was working at is nobody felt bad. We always had a lot of constructive criticism, let me put it, which helped the company grow, its employees grow. But I think that is way better than not communicating properly.
How did you end up like shifting your jobs now, like, you know, from your startup company now to Zalando? Like, what happened?
Yeah. So the journey, basically. This was a bit spontaneous. I hadn't planned for it, but in the back of my mind, I had it that I do want to try what it's like working at a bigger firm. And Zalando, definitely the biggest e-commerce company here in Germany, was attractive. The name itself just sounded very exciting. So one Sunday afternoon, lazy Sunday afternoon, I was applying for jobs to see what's in the market, because it is very important to, even when you have got a job, just keep analyzing the market. If there's something exciting, look for recent trends. So I was doing this exercise and I came across my current position on Zalando's homepage, and I just went for it. I did not put too much effort into it, but I just gave it a shot and we'll see where it goes. But then things escalated very quickly. 2 weeks, 4 rounds of interviews, and then an offer was out. So the whole transition from me leaving the old company and my first day at Zalando was 2 months, I think. I think it was very quick, not planned. But then the offer was right on the table, so I grabbed it. And yeah, I think overall, it's been great working at Zalando. And it's a big company. There's a lot of people in finance. There's always like people that you can talk to. And I think majorly I do like to work for a company that big, because I just wanted to check out what the organizational culture is and how it feels to be working in.
So your 4 interviews, yes, how are the interviews? Like, what do they generally, like, you know, talk about? Like, I know it's maybe a bit too long back, but like if you have any kind of like, you know, even broad idea, that would really help.
Yeah, sure. So usually, irrespective of Zalando or any other company, it always starts with an introductory interview, let's say, which is the first round, usually happens between an HR person and the applicant. Mine was a bit different. I had it with an HR person and the team lead for the position and myself. So the first round itself was more about getting to know the team, getting to know if I fit within the team. So questions like, tell me about yourself, which is always going to be asked. It's not the most easiest question. It sounds easy, but it's not that easy.
You have to prepare for it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And when they ask you that, it's not more about, hey, what your name is or where you're from, what are your hobbies. It's totally the opposite, right? It's more about you already start with, why are you the candidate for this job and what can you bring to the table? Because that's what they care about, right? Right now. So my first interview started off with that, and then questions about teamwork, I think. Teamwork, productivity, how would I manage multiple tasks that needed high level priority? Questions like these were asked by the HR as well as the team lead. And also they were trying to assess how I fit within the team. Am I someone who enjoys working with different people in different projects? And Zalando has a set of principles, which they call the founding principles. So most of the questions that HR asks are related to those principles. So it's very important to read up about the company, about their mindset, about their mission. And that goes for any other company that you're applying to, right? So I think the first interview was that one. The second interview was more about interacting with different people from different teams within the finance pillar. This is more, I would say, task-oriented and situational questions on the spot. This is where they assess if you have the relevant knowledge and skills about the job that you've applied to. Um, Sometimes it's like half an hour, sometimes can take a day long, but mine was 2 hours, split into half an hour sessions. And then the third interview, I think, was more with the final VP of finance, which is a very casual 15-20 minute interview, just to see how I am like outside of work, because that's also very important working in a team. So overall, my preparation, if I put it in a gist, it can be a bit overwhelming. Too many interviews, people sort to get tense, stress, anxious. That is all normal. Even the HR people know that people are nervous, and they're not trying to make it difficult, right? So just calm down, do your research, and think about questions that you think will be asked. Already think about answers that you're going to tell them, because you don't want to freeze during the interview.
Mhm.
And that way, I think it should be fine. Just go with it.
Now, in the interviews again, like, of course, there must have been so many candidates who were applying to the job. What do you think that you did right, like that you got the job?
Yeah, extremely good. I actually asked that to my teammate. 3 months into the job, I asked her in one of our morning stand-ups, "Hey, why did you choose me and not the other candidates?" Her answer was pretty funny, which I can share here with you today. She said, "I liked your CV." And then I said, "What about my CV?" And then she responded, "It was colorful." So
That's
I
interesting.
think what she meant to say here is that it was quite easy to comprehend, easy to read. And sometimes it's as little as that, right? There's
Mm.
so many applicants. I think I was reading an article on Glassdoor the other day which says there's approximately 250 applicants for each job, but then how do you stand out in so many people, right? So
Mm.
again, my CV was pretty short, one page, visually very attractive, appealing, and it was very easy to comprehend. So that was the reason why I got hired for the position.
Mm-hmm. That's very important. I think like good designing is like definitely so, and people can also like do it rather easily. It's like if you go to like websites like Canva or something, like you will have so many like resume templates, like maybe pick some of them, you might find some free ones, but as long as you're putting some time inside and making it look a bit modern, I think, yeah, for sure. About like the LinkedIn profiles and things like that, like did they share with you if like they did take a look at your social media or something? Or I mean, nobody's going to share, of course, but was there some feedback like that? Or like where did you see them hiring other people and then talking about that, okay, like this is the standard procedure that we also like take a look at the social media?
As far as I remember off, because right now I'm also interviewing some other candidates for open positions in finance. Um, Based on that experience, we are normally not looking at the LinkedIn profile.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the CV and the cover letter.
Mm-hmm.
And some companies do tend to just get onto the LinkedIn and see the profile. Again, the other point that I want to make here is that your LinkedIn should be very up to date. It has to be accurate, updated, and LinkedIn is a great source of building your network, reaching out for jobs that you find on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, even if people who you will be reporting to haven't seen your LinkedIn profile, I would normally just check their LinkedIn profile before the interview. And it's always a good sign, and they like it that you've actually made the effort of going to see
Mm-hmm.
who you will be reporting to and learn more about the person before the interview. Yeah, because they do get a notification the moment you see the
Yeah.
LinkedIn profile. So definitely recommend to use LinkedIn more often. It's consider it the professional Facebook.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now about the jobs now, Riaz, like, that you're not able to, let's say, find a lot of jobs in English. So what kind of tips like would you have, like, because you said like you're also like looking for candidates right now on behalf of your company. So what kind of things like stood out to you when you are like, let's say, not having the filter that, okay, you just need German speaking candidates or something?
I can talk more about the finance requirements in
Yeah,
this.
sure.
I think so. One, first and the most important thing that we always emphasize on is if you don't have German skills, please work on those, right? Because eventually you will need it. But even if you're at A2, B1, that is still good enough to start at least in finance at Zalando.
Mhm.
And we're not only looking for language skills, but also other qualifications that you have. Doesn't mean bachelor's or master's, but ongoing courses that you've been enrolled in, some extracurriculars, some voluntary work that you've been doing on the side, because it may not sound very important, but at the same time, it makes a huge impact on the job application. Because that goes to show that you're very engaged, you're always learning, keeping up with the latest trends. So I think on top of German, also very important to have other qualifications. And yeah, as for if German is the primary requirement for a job, and there can be nothing that can be done about that, but then you have to learn German. I think that's the sad fact there, but that's
Mhm.
the only way that you can apply to more jobs
Yeah,
that you see online. Because yeah, that's definitely, if it was in IT, I think IT in Berlin,
super
you can
easy.
survive on German.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
Perfect. I think like all of that does make sense. And also like I think this is a general recommendation for anybody like who's thinking about like moving to most of the European countries. Like if you move to Denmark, think of learning Danish. If you move to like Netherlands, like Dutch helps, although they have like a lot of like English speaking culture, but like just the standard like Austria, Switzerland, Germany, like the country you move to, like it's better that you have the proficiency in that particular language, especially in like finance sectors, because I know, like, you were telling about like the finance like conversations and so on. Like many times when you have to like speak to the public authorities, like these kind of things are needed. Like in civil engineering side, when I was doing my internship in Berlin, many of the so most all of the documents would be in German, which are coming from the public authorities. Now, if you're not the person who can communicate or take over the responsibility of communicating with them particular things, then like again like it's just a weak link in the entire chain. So like I think that could be like something which can hamper the job search.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
And
Yes, thank you so much for taking all the time. Like are there any like final tips and advices that you would like to like share with the viewers who are like watching this?
yeah, sure. One, I think first and most biggest tip that I can give here is, again, Bharat has emphasized so many times that learn German if you come into Germany, even if you don't need it for your job. But all I want to say here is being bilingual, multilingual is always an asset. Even if you don't need it for your job, it's always good to have it on your resume. And at some point, you might use it in the future, right? So go for it. Yeah.
Mhm. Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you so much, Riaz, again for taking all the time. It was very nice talking to you and learn about your experience of how you ended up with a final job in Germany. And anybody else who is watching this video, I will put a lot of like free materials already in the description below so that you can take a look at that. And if you still have any kind of questions whatsoever, comment on the video and we will try to respond to it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye.